everyone. First I just want to apologize for basically skipping almost 2 weeks of not posting. I have been very busy in a good way. I was actually working on some clothes for a wedding, so it took up a lot of time. I could not record, but here I am. I have decided that I will probably extend this series into the month of August, just so that I can actually finish the content I had planned. And I ask that you just bear with me. I think I need to definitely plan ahead with my content, so that when work gets very hectic and very heavy, I can be able to just release the videos. Either way, welcome to today's video and let's begin. As we continue with the series of things you should know if you sew, this week's video is going to be about your sewing room. I know not everybody has enough space in their accommodation where they live to have a whole room designated for sewing, but you can have a sewing space. And I am just going to give you ideas of what you can do to create a good sewing room, and basically what you need in your sewing room, what people keep in their sewing room. I'm going to do it in slide form so that you can be able to basically take screenshots if you need them, or just get some ideas. Of course, there are always timestamps, but you can skip ahead. But I just thought it would be very helpful to do a video like this. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a tour of my sewing space, because for me, my sewing space is all over the place, and I won't lie, it's a bit disorganized, and the goodness is I usually know everything. It's not very helpful, but it's definitely important to arrange your sewing space in a way that it's easy to find things. So even if you have someone helping you with some sewing projects, you don't have to keep telling them where everything is. So either way, I'm going to share what I know about sewing spaces, and once I've organized mine, maybe I'll give a tour of my sewing space, but for now I'll just give tips, and probably I'll have to follow them myself. So let's begin. Number one, you cannot underestimate the need for a well-lit room or a well-lit corner wherever it is that you're sewing. You need a space that has enough natural light. Natural light is the best, but of course, if you do not have access to natural light, then fluorescent artificial light would do. The other thing about natural light is that you have to make sure that especially the sun, is not in direct contact with your fabrics, especially because it will damage the fabrics. It will bleach it. And also, it just can't be too dim, because you need to be able to see what you're doing. And also, just avoid very, very bright lights that cause a lot of shadows or might make your eyes very sensitive to light. But a well-lit room with a lot of natural light is usually just the best if you have access to that. Another essential is definitely the cutting table. I can just tell you many times that I've had to cut something on the floor and my back pains and my knees pain. There's nothing as good as a good study table, and it has to be a table that's at a good height, that you don't have to bend so far back down. So maybe around your hip line, because that one you don't have to bend so much. It's usually just the most ideal. You can be creative with the table. You can get a collapsible one if you don't have a lot of space, or so you only use it when you're cutting. Or you can get one that's adjustable up and down, or you can also just get one that also has storage space, which is a very good way to maximize your space in the sewing room. So just get a good cutting table. It will really save you a lot of backaches and knee aches in the future. Of course, you need tools and equipment, so a sewing room cannot be complete without those, because how are you going to work? So I just made a rough list of basic things you need, because there are also additional things that are not on the list, but these are like the very basic things you should have in your sewing room. You basically can't work without these things on the list. So the overlock machine can be optional, because at least here in Kenya, you can outsource that service. You can sew up to a certain point and take it to be overlocked, but it's definitely an essential, because they have different price ranges and you can get them as cheap or as expensive as you want. And I think I have already done a list of things you need from my Vlogmas series, so check that out. I have done a very good list. I think there are 24, because it was 24 days before Christmas, so check it out. There's a better list there. And also, one thing you should never forget is that these tools and equipment need proper care in how you store them and how you maintain them. Like your machines, you should use a surge protector socket so that at least when there's an electrical issue, your machines are protected. Make sure your machines are serviced. Make sure you clean your machine, especially the serger or overlock machine gets dirty all the time because you are using it to neaten edges. So make sure you do that. Sharp objects should be kept away because anyone can get hurt. From kids, even adults. I have dropped pins sometimes and I always have to look for it so it doesn't prick anybody. And then just use the right tools for the jobs. It saves you time and also just prevents damaging your tools and equipment. So that's something that is important in your sewing room. This may seem obvious, but you actually need a comfortable chair. I have suffered periods of time where I have serious neck pains and back pains because I did not use a good chair while I was sewing. So a comfortable chair is very important, preferably one with a high back, adjustable height, has padding on it so that when you sit, you're cushioned. Armrest is optional. I guess it depends on the person, and it can also twirl around or swivel. So those are the things they've recommended on the internet. For me, I just get a nice padded cushion chair because I don't necessarily use my chair to get around my sewing room. I just get up and do what I need to do. But you cannot underestimate the kind of chair you should get. And also, just a point of note, if you do run a production facility where you do mass production, some things that are checked about the workers' safety is the kind of chair you give them. You cannot just get away with giving a tailor a stool. They have to actually have a comfortable chair that they can be able to work in. So just take note of that as well. You definitely need a space where you can iron or press while you are working, because part of making a garment is that you iron the seams and corners and hems as you sew. So you definitely need a designated space for that. Because you will be using it as you're sewing. So there are different types of irons. You can just start with a basic iron. You don't have to go all out. But of course, as you advance, there are industrial irons you can buy. There are very fancy steam irons you can also buy. But it's just good to have a designated space for ironing with a basic iron. If you have a basic iron, just make sure you have a water bottle on the side as well. And a cushion as well for ironing, also known as a sewing ham. So there is the project board. You can use a literal board and pin it in the wall and basically just put your work up there to visualize it, or you can use digital. So basically this is just to help you with your work progress, organizing it if you're doing a design process and everything. It helps you look at the colors together, fabrics together, textures. You can even add other images on your board to see maybe there's a skirt you liked in a certain design or things like that. So this is a very good thing to have in your sewing room. If you need it, you can also have it digitally, but it's always good, especially if you are working as a team. It's a good way for even to get the input from the rest of the team. Calendars and planners are also very useful for your sewing room because it helps you keep track of your schedule, basically deadlines that you need to meet, whether it's for your client or for yourself, for the project you're working on. It's just very important to have calendars and planners. Also, how long you want to give certain projects help with this. So it's just an additional way of managing your work and planning. Another very essential tool or equipment is the mirror. You really cannot work without a mirror because as you sew, especially if you're sewing things for yourself, you really need that mirror to see stuff. Even if you're not sewing things for yourself and you're sewing things for your clients, they need a mirror to be able to see themselves, to see if they like how the fit is and everything like that. So mirrors are very, very essential. So usually you can work with just one mirror. A full-length mirror is preferable. If you have more than one full-length mirror, even better, so that someone can have a view of both the front and the back. What has happened lately to me, because I still have only one mirror, is
Sometimes I end up having to take a photo of the client with my phone so they can see how the back looks, the areas they cannot see very well. So sometimes that also gives them a glimpse of it, but just have a mirror. It's very helpful during just the sewing process and the fitting process as well. So lastly, the main thing you have to think about in your sewing room is storage. Basically how you use your space. Storage is a very, very big issue in workspaces, especially for fashion, and especially if generally you work on more than one project. So how you store your patterns is very important. You can store them in ring binders, you can store them in boxes, you can print patterns, because some patterns you get them on PDF, you can print them and store them. You can also just leave them on the computer, but of course you have to print them to use them. Magazines and books can be put on shelves because you need to refer to them often. Fabric scraps are probably the biggest headache of storage because even after you have used up fabric, you always have leftover fabric that you have to think about what you're going to do with them, if you're going to discard them or you're going to keep them. Either way, you can use storage bins, you can use shelves, you can even use these plastic storage bags. We call them here Nigeria bags. I don't know why they have that name locally. Even when you search on the internet, that's how it's called locally. But I have used these bags specifically to store my scraps. I don't really color coordinate my scraps, but I store my scraps from there. Storage containers, small ones for putting your needles, threads, all those small sewing accessories. You also need a container to put your projects, maybe something you're working on and you don't want it to get dirty or lost. This is a very fancy plastic briefcase thing. You can use envelopes for your patterns. You can use boxes for your storage projects or anything that can accommodate them. So I think it's just about planning, but how you store your things really, really determines how your use of space is and how neat your workshop will be. And it's always just good for it to be organized, especially if you have you work with other people and you're not the only person, and it's easy to get things. If you can even label, even better. I know my storage space is not necessarily the neatest because I have things all over, because I don't have one specific sewing. I have a specific sewing area, but I don't have a specific storage space. So my things tend to be all over the place. Something I'm working on. Yeah. So storage is important.
I hope the content was helpful and it will help you plan your sewing room in a better way. And I'm sure some of you have other ideas I did not point out, so feel free to write your ideas in the comment section. There are so many brilliant ideas I've seen on Pinterest and on blogs, even on YouTube. There are people who really share a lot about their sewing space, but I just thought that I would share something that is very practical for someone who doesn't have a lot of money and they just want to get going. Because sometimes I think you can want this perfect space to work in and it's not possible. So I just thought I would point out the very essential of things what you could do. I know for people who have maybe kids, maybe if you're working at home and you have kids around, it could be very difficult. So sometimes how you store your items, like in the storage bins, would be very helpful. Or in a place that you can lock it up. It can be very helpful because sewing has very many sharp things like needles, scissors, pins, and they can be very, very dangerous. If you can have your own separate room where you can sew, it's awesome. I know that keeping scraps is not something that everyone can do, but if you don't want to keep scraps, there are people who reuse scraps. So instead of throwing them away and adding to the pollution that's already there from the fashion industry, consider donating the scraps. There are schools who use scraps for craft projects with kids. There are people who make things with them, furniture. I have learned that people who make furniture sometimes stuff the furniture with some fabric scraps, and generally you can never miss someone who needs scraps. Even if you ask your local tailor, they will probably tell you of people who come and collect the scraps. So managing your waste is also part of having a sewing room, so please consider that. Avoid as much as possible just throwing your scraps or burning them. There's always use for them. Like I can give you an example. For me, a lot of my scraps that I've had for years, I think I started keeping scraps from around 2013 when I started my fashion brand, and even before that, because I always did sewing projects, and that's what helped me make masks, because the small scraps were small enough for me to do things. I will definitely do a video on how I utilize my scraps so that it's helpful. It's there on my Instagram page, the Miyamara page. There was a time I did my zero waste video, because I'm really trying to get my business into zero waste. Right now I'm about 70% there, because I still throw away some of the smaller scraps. I've not found a use for them. But also just cutting clothes efficiently, or cutting any sewing project efficiently, and reducing waste is very important, just so that you don't have to litter and everything like that. So I just hope it's been helpful, and I guess I will see you next week. I promise this time I will not delay, so maybe the video might even come earlier than today's. But looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you for the support as usual. Welcome new members. Please subscribe and share, and I will see you. Bye.